In the vast expanse of stars that made up the known universe, few kingdoms inspired as much awe and fear as Arcanus, a realm where ancient mechanical artistry merged with cutting-edge biotechnology, where towering metal spires pierced the atmosphere alongside living, breathing botanical structures. From orbit, the kingdom resembled a grand experiment, half gleaming silver, half verdant green, a testament to opposing forces held in precarious harmony. Kale walked the boundary between these worlds, his slender frame moving with the unhurried grace of someone who had all the time in the universe. And perhaps he did. The roads beneath his feet had changed countless times over the centuries he had wandered them, from dirt paths to quantum-stabilized thoroughfares, yet his stride remained constant, measured by the rhythm of someone who had seen empires rise and fall. At first glance, nothing about him suggested extraordinary capabilities. His face bore the weathered lines of a man who had lived perhaps 4 decades, though his exact age remained indeterminate. His attire was unremarkable, functional garments in muted earth tones that helped him blend into any crowd. But those who looked closely enough might notice his eyes, depthless pools of midnight blue that seemed to contain galaxies, hinting at knowledge and experiences beyond mortal comprehension. Today, he paused at the edge of Meridian, Arcanus's capital city, gazing at its impossible architecture, half organic, half mechanical buildings stretched toward 3 suns, their facades constantly shifting and reconfiguring as living metal adjusted to changing light conditions. The streets teemed with citizens, some fully human, others with mechanical augmentations ranging from subtle neural enhancements to complete bodily transformations. Cyborgs had become the elite of Arcanus society, with the most heavily augmented claiming positions of power and privilege. And at the pinnacle of this technological aristocracy stood Queen Elysia, the Eternal. The Queen's reign stretched back 200 years, maintained through increasingly sophisticated augmentations that had rendered her virtually immortal. Her original human form had long since been replaced by an intricate fusion of bioengineered tissues and quantum mechanical components. Each decade, her royal engineers would unveil new evolutions to her form, preserving her position at the forefront of Arcanus's technological advancement. What remained of Elysia's humanity was debated in whispers throughout the kingdom. Some claimed her brain remained organic, though vastly enhanced. Others insisted nothing remained of the original woman, that she was now entirely artificial intelligence housed in a body that merely evoked human form. What no one questioned, however, was her absolute authority, enforced by legions of mechanical sentinels and an omnipresent AI surveillance network known as the Eternal Eye. From her mechanized citadel, a towering structure that continuously rebuilt itself according to her whims, Queen Elysia ruled with calculated precision. Her policies were neither cruel nor kind, but rather the product of complex algorithms designed to maximize Arcanus's prosperity and technological progress. Emotions, she had long ago declared, were inefficiencies that advanced societies must evolve beyond. Yet despite her supposed transcendence of human foibles, Elysia harbored one distinctly human trait: boredom. Immortality had given her time to master every skill, explore every corner of her realm, and exhaust every conventional source of stimulation. And so, to the horror and fascination of her subjects, she had developed a peculiar form of entertainment: the hunt. On this particular morning, holographic announcements materialized throughout Arcanus, bearing the Queen's perfect, metallic visage. Citizens of Arcanus. Her voice resonated, artificially modulated to evoke both authority and allure. Today marks the commencement of the 87th Royal Hunt. After exhaustive analysis, I have identified a quarry worthy of my pursuit, a being of significant potential whose capture will advance our understanding of biological and technological limits. Her holographic eyes, silver irises rotating like gears, seemed to look directly at Kyle as he stood in the city's outskirts. The hunt begins at sunset. All citizens are encouraged to report sightings of unusual individuals to the Eternal Eye. Those providing information leading to a successful capture will be granted Tier 1 augmentation privileges. The announcement concluded with the materialization of an image, a somewhat blurred rendering of a slender man with midnight blue eyes. Kale sighed, a soft exhalation that carried the weight of experiences beyond counting. He had hoped to pass through Arcanus unnoticed, as he had so many realms before. Yet something about him had captured the Queen's attention, perhaps an anomaly in his biosignature, or a pattern in his movements that defied predictive algorithms. Whatever the cause, his path forward was now clear. He would have to run. Kale had barely taken 3 steps when the ground beneath him erupted. Mechanical tendrils, each tipped with sensor arrays and capture mechanisms, burst through the pavement and lunged for his limbs. A standard opening move in the Queen's arsenal, a surprise attack to test the quarry's reflexes. What wasn't standard was Kale's response. Rather than panic or flight, he moved with fluid precision, his body weaving between the grasping tendrils as though he had anticipated their exact trajectories. With movements too fast for ordinary human perception, he slipped past the mechanical trap and into a narrow alley between 2 biomechanical structures. In the surveillance hub of the mechanized citadel, Queen Elysia watched the escape with something approaching genuine emotion. Her silver eyes widened fractionally, and the mechanical components that comprised her elegant face reconfigured to display what might have been surprise. "Interesting," she murmured, her voice lacking its usual artificial modulation. He anticipated the subterranean capture protocol. She turned to 3 imposing figures who stood silently in the shadows of her chamber. "It seems we have found something truly worthy of pursuit. Deploy the first-tier sentinels." As Kale moved deeper into the labyrinthine streets of Meridian, he knew his time in Arcanus had become significantly more complicated. The city itself would become his enemy, every surface potentially a sensor, every passerby potentially an informant. He needed to reach the Verdant Zone, the biologically dominant region where the Queen's technological influence was marginally weaker. The boundary between Meridian's mechanical district and the Verdant Zone was heavily monitored, a checkpoint where citizens were scanned and categorized according to their technological enhancements. Those with minimal augmentations were subjected to additional scrutiny before being allowed into the predominantly mechanical areas of the capital. Kale approached this barrier cautiously, noting the array of sensors designed to detect everything from neural patterns to cellular anomalies. Direct passage would be impossible. His unique physiological signature would trigger every alarm in the system. Instead, he turned his attention to a maintenance tunnel, a conduit for the nutrient solutions that fed the city's living architectural components. Accessing a concealed panel, he slipped into the narrow passage, navigating through a network of tubes filled with glowing, life-sustaining fluids. The nutrient system carried him beneath the checkpoint and into the outskirts of the Verdant Zone, where he emerged in a grove of enormous trees whose trunks housed processing nodes for the biological side of Arcanus's infrastructure. Here, the air was thick with spores and microscopic organisms that interfered with the more sensitive technological detection systems. But his reprieve was short-lived. A shadow detached itself from the canopy above, a sleek, humanoid figure whose chrome exterior reflected the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. Its movements were silent, its form perfectly balanced as it landed mere feet from where Kyle stood. "Designation, Sentinel Prime," the figure announced, its featureless face suddenly splitting along invisible seams to reveal an array of sensory equipment. "Function, acquisition of designated quarry for Her Eternal Majesty." Kale's posture shifted subtly, weight redistributed, muscles tensed in preparation. "I have no quarrel with Arcanus or its queen," he said, his voice carrying an unusual resonance. "I am merely passing through." "Analysis indicates falsehood," the sentinel responded, its arms transforming into precisely calibrated capture devices. "Your biosignature contains anomalies consistent with technologies unknown to Arcanus archives. You are classified as an asset of strategic importance." Without further dialogue, the sentinel attacked, a blur of chrome limbs and cutting-edge weaponry. Its movements were perfectly calculated, executed with inhuman precision and speed. Yet Kale moved faster still. As he evaded the sentinel's initial assault, something unusual occurred. A faint, Blue luminescence became visible beneath his skin, tracing patterns like circuit pathways along his arms and neck. The Sentinel adjusted its attack parameters, analyzing this new data and recalibrating its approach. Their combat led them deeper into the verdant zone, away from curious eyes and the most concentrated surveillance networks. The Sentinel pursued relentlessly, its mechanical body adapting to each environment, extending climbing apparatus to navigate through dense foliage, deploying aquatic modifications to cross streams. During one particularly intense exchange, the Sentinel's capture claw managed to graze Kale's forearm, tearing his sleeve and exposing the skin beneath. The wound that appeared was unlike any human injury. Instead of blood, a luminous blue energy briefly pulsed before the tissue began rapidly reknitting itself. The Sentinel's sensory array focused on this phenomenon, recording data to transmit back to the mechanized citadel. This momentary diversion was all Kale needed. With a movement too swift to track, he placed his palm against the Sentinel's chest plate and, impossibly, his hand seemed to phase partially through the metal. The Sentinel froze, its system suddenly disrupted by an energy surge it couldn't process. Its chrome surface dulled as internal mechanisms failed, and it collapsed to the forest floor, temporarily deactivated but not destroyed. Kale examined his arm, watching as the last traces of the wound vanished, leaving unmarked skin. His expression betrayed concern, not for his injury, but for what it revealed. He had exposed more of his nature than he had intended, and in doing so, had likely intensified the Queen's interest. In the mechanized citadel, Queen Elysia reviewed the data transmitted by the fallen Sentinel. The footage played before her in a three-dimensional projection, focusing particularly on the moment when Kale's wound revealed the energy beneath his skin. "Remarkable," she whispered, her silver eyes rotating rapidly as she processed the implications. Not cybernetic, not purely biological either. She turned to the three figures still waiting silently in her chamber. "This changes our approach. I want him intact and functional for study." The central figure stepped forward, a towering entity whose form blended the precision of advanced machinery with the fluidity of biological movement. Unlike the standard Sentinels, this being possessed distinct facial features, aristocratic and severe, with eyes that glowed amber. "Eternal Huntsman Vex will pursue the quarry," it stated, referring to itself in the third person as all the Queen's elite hunters did. "Permission to deploy full capability spectrum." Elysia's mechanical lips curved into a smile. "Granted, Vex. But remember, I want him functional. Damage only what will heal." Vex bowed, joints moving with uncanny smoothness, before turning to leave the chamber. The hunt had escalated, and Kale's future had become considerably more precarious. Deep in the verdant zone, Kale sought sanctuary in one of the few places where technology and biology existed in true harmony: the workshop of a young bioengineer named Maya. Unlike most Arcanese citizens who chose either technological augmentation or biological purism, Maya pursued integration and balance between the two approaches. Her laboratory was housed within a massive, ancient tree, its interior hollowed and reinforced with sustainable materials. Sophisticated equipment shared space with living plant specimens, creating an environment that reflected her philosophy of harmonious coexistence. Maya herself embodied this balance. Her body was mostly organic, but strategic augmentations enhanced her intellectual capabilities and sensory perception. Her honey-colored skin contrasted with the vivid green of her eyes, biological irises enhanced with microscopic sensors that allowed her to perceive spectra beyond normal human vision. When Kale appeared at her hidden entrance, Maya's enhanced vision immediately detected the unusual energy patterns beneath his skin. "You're not what you appear to be," she stated, bypassing conventional greetings as she ushered him inside. "And you've attracted very unwanted attention." Kale smiled faintly. "An unfortunate habit of mine. The Queen has initiated one of her hunts." Maya's expression darkened. Her hunts usually end with another specimen in her collection, either preserved in stasis or dissected for study. She gestured to a concealed alcove where her scanning equipment was housed. "May I?" If I'm going to help you, I need to understand what we're dealing with. After a moment's hesitation, Kale nodded and positioned himself within the scanning field. Maya activated her equipment, and holographic representations of his internal structures materialized in the air between them. What the scans revealed left her momentarily speechless. Kyle's body appeared human on the surface, but beneath that facade lay something far more complex, a network of energy pathways that resembled neither blood vessels nor neural connections, carrying a form of energy her instruments couldn't properly classify. "How is this possible?" she whispered, manipulating the holographic display to examine the phenomenon from different angles. "You're not cybernetic, but this isn't purely biological either." "It's both, and neither," Kale replied. "A product of an era before the distinction between biological and technological became so rigid." He gestured to the energy pathways. "What you're seeing is the result of evolution and adaptation over a much longer timeline than most would consider possible." Maya's enhanced eyes narrowed as she processed this information. "You're saying you're ancient? Older than the Queen's 2 centuries? A look of distant amusement crossed Kale's features. "The Queen and we share certain historical perspectives, though she's achieved her longevity through very different means." Before Maya could pursue this line of questioning further, her security system emitted a soft warning tone. The display shifted to show exterior surveillance, a squadron of standard sentinels converging on the massive tree, led by a much more imposing figure. "Eternal Huntsman Vex," Maya breathed, her voice tight with apprehension. "We need to move. Now." She quickly gathered essential equipment into a compact pack, including a device she had been developing, a prototype energy modulator designed to harmonize biological and technological systems. As she worked, she explained, "Vex is one of 3 elite hunters created specifically for the Queen's more challenging quarries. The others are Nyx and Axion. Each specializes in different hunting environments and techniques." Kale watched the approaching hunter on the display. "And Vex's specialty?" "Biological systems," Maya replied grimly. "He can sense and manipulate life processes, accelerate aging, induce cellular breakdown, even temporarily halt metabolic functions. If he touches you, he can fundamentally disrupt whatever keeps you alive." They exited through a concealed passage that led deeper into the verdant zone, leaving automated systems to scrub all evidence of their presence from Maya's laboratory. The dense biological environment provided some cover from surveillance, but Vex's specialized capabilities meant they couldn't rely on the forest alone for protection. Their destination was a system of ancient tunnels that predated Arcanis itself, remnants of the civilization that had initially developed the biotechnological foundations upon which the current kingdom was built. These catacombs were rumored to contain artifacts of immense power and knowledge, though few had the courage or capability to explore them. As they navigated through increasingly primal sections of the verdant zone, Maya found herself studying Kale with growing curiosity. "You still haven't explained why the Queen is so fixated on capturing you specifically. What makes you different from her other quarries?" Kale was silent for several moments, his midnight blue eyes focused on the path ahead. "Elysia seeks what she believes she's lost in her transformation, the ineffable quality that distinguishes genuine life from mere existence. Her augmentations have granted her extended time, but at the cost of certain experiences. And she thinks you have what she's missing." "Perhaps." His voice carried a weight of knowledge that seemed at odds with his apparent age. "Or perhaps she simply recognizes something familiar in me, a reminder of possibilities she once considered before choosing her current path." Their conversation was abruptly terminated by a sound that didn't belong in the forest, a high-pitched, barely audible whine that made Maya wince as her augmented hearing amplified it. Kale reacted instantly, pulling her behind the massive trunk of a bioluminescent tree just as a concentrated energy pulse tore through the space where they had been standing. "Impressive reflexes," came a smooth, modulated voice from the canopy above. "Most organic beings require at least 1.3 seconds to process and react to that particular frequency. You managed it in 0.4. Vex descended from the treetops, his movements fluid and precisely controlled. In the dappled light of the forest, his form was even more imposing than it had appeared on Maya's surveillance feed, over 7 feet tall, with a frame that combined the best aspects of mechanical durability and biological adaptability. The queen grows impatient, Vex continued, amber eyes scanning their position with multiple sensory systems simultaneously. She has authorized increasingly invasive acquisition methods. Kale stepped partially out from behind the tree, positioning himself between Maya and the hunter. Your queen's curiosity doesn't justify this pursuit. I have no quarrel with Arcanus. Vex's face, more expressive than standard sentinels but still unnervingly artificial, configured into something approximating amusement. Quarrel is irrelevant. Value is the only metric of significance. Your biological anomalies represent potential advancement for Arcanus technology. Personal preference does not factor into the equation. With that declaration, Vex launched his attack, not with weapons, but with his specialized capability. The air between them seemed to distort as he projected a field designed to accelerate biological decay in targeted organisms. Vegetation in the field's path withered instantly, leaves crumbling to dust and wood blackening as though centuries had passed in moments. Kale pushed Maya clear of the effect's range before facing it directly. As the field washed over him, his skin briefly took on the texture of ancient parchment, and his posture bent as though under enormous weight. But then, remarkably, the blue energy beneath his skin pulsed more intensely, pushing back against the artificial aging. Vex's amber eyes widened in genuine surprise. Impossible, he murmured, increasing the intensity of his attack. No biological system can resist temporal acceleration at this magnitude. But Kale did more than resist. He advanced, each step seemingly more difficult than the last, but never halting. The blue energy now emanated visibly from his entire body, creating a luminous outline that pushed against Vex's decay field. When Kale was mere feet from the hunter, Vex abruptly shifted tactics, launching a physical attack with limbs that moved faster than ordinary human perception could track. But Kale, despite his apparently weakened state, moved with equal speed, evading most strikes and deflecting others with precisely timed counters. During this exchange, Maya circled behind them, activating her prototype energy modulator. The device emitted a field that interfered with the complex signals controlling Vex's biological components, causing momentary disruptions in his coordination. This distraction gave Kale the opening he needed. With a movement almost too swift to follow, he placed his palm against Vex's chest, just as he had with the standard sentinel earlier. But this time, the effect was different. Instead of simply disrupting mechanical systems, Kale's hand glowed with intense blue energy that seemed to interface directly with Vex's biomechanical components. The hunter froze, his amber eyes flickering erratically as conflicting signals coursed through his systems. When Kale withdrew his hand, Vex remained standing, but immobilized, trapped in a loop of contradictory commands. "What did you do to him?" Maya asked, approaching cautiously. "Introduced an information paradox into his operating parameters," Kale replied, his voice strained. The encounter had clearly cost him. His skin still bore traces of the artificial aging, and the blue energy beneath had dimmed considerably. "It won't hold him for long, but it should buy us time to reach the catacombs." As they continued their journey, leaving the paralyzed hunter behind, Maya noticed something alarming, a wound on Kale's arm that hadn't been there before, where one of Vex's strikes had connected, unlike the injury from the sentinel, which had healed almost instantly. This wound remained open, the flesh around it bearing the grayish cast of accelerated decay. "Your regenerative ability isn't working on this," she observed, concern evident in her voice. Kale examined the injury with clinical detachment. Vex's attack contained elements designed to disrupt normal healing processes. It will recover, but more slowly than usual. His midnight blue eyes met hers. "My resources are not infinite, Maya. Each confrontation depletes energies that take time to replenish." This admission, this vulnerability, seemed to humanize him in a way that his extraordinary abilities had not. For all his power and apparent age, he could be wounded, could be weakened, perhaps even killed, if the right methods were employed. This realization added urgency to their journey as they pressed deeper into the wilderness, toward the ancient heart of what would eventually become Arcanus. In the mechanized citadel, Queen Elysia reviewed the data transmitted from Vex before his systems had been compromised. The footage played in 3 dimensions before her, focusing on the moment when Kale had resisted the temporal acceleration field, something no known biological entity should have been capable of. "Fascinating," she murmured, her silver eyes rotating as she analyzed the energy patterns emanating from Kyle's body. "There are similarities to certain ancient energy signatures in our oldest archives." She turned to the 2 remaining Eternal Huntsmen who stood at attention in her chamber. Unlike Vex, whose design emphasized biological manipulation, these hunters had different specializations. Nyx was a sleek, midnight black figure whose form seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her specialty was environmental manipulation, control over darkness, temperature, and atmospheric conditions. The perfect hunter for pursuing quarry through Arcanus's most inhospitable regions. Beside her stood Axion, whose bulkier frame housed reality-warping technology that allowed him to create localized distortions in space, compressing distances or generating gravity wells to trap prey. His chrome and copper body was etched with complex mathematical equations that continuously recalculated and optimized his spatial manipulations. Vex's approach was too direct, Elysia stated, her metallic voice tinged with something almost like anticipation. "Our quarry requires a more immersive strategy." She focused her attention on Nyx. "You will proceed to the boundary of the ancient catacombs. They are clearly his destination. Prepare the environment to your advantage." Nyx bowed, her movement so fluid it seemed she was composed of shadow rather than matter. "As you command, Eternal Majesty." As Nyx departed, Elysia addressed Axion. "Gather a contingent of standard sentinels and approach from the opposite direction. Create a converging net to drive our quarry toward Nyx's prepared zone." Axion nodded, his movements more mechanical than his counterparts. "Probability of successful acquisition?" A smile formed on Elysia's perfect metallic face. "With our combined efforts, approaching certainty." Yet behind this confidence, something else flickered in the Queen's silver eyes. A question that had begun to form since the first unusual readings had been detected from Kale. A question about his true nature, and why certain aspects of his energy signature triggered recognition algorithms linked to her oldest memory banks. As the royal hunters mobilized, a new player entered the unfolding drama. General Jorak, once the Queen's most trusted military commander, had been monitoring the hunt with increasing interest from his position of exile in the industrial district, a gritty, smoke-filled region where Arcanus's less presentable manufacturing took place. Jorak's fall from grace had occurred 5 decades earlier, following a failed campaign against mysterious raiders from beyond Arcanus's borders. These raiders had employed technologies that defied conventional analysis, technologies that, Jorak now realized, bore striking similarities to the energy signatures emanating from the Queen's current quarry. Unlike many of Arcanus's elite, Jorak had refused complete cybernetic transformation, maintaining a largely human appearance despite significant internal augmentations. His weathered face bore the scars of numerous battles, and his right arm had been replaced with a utilitarian military-grade prosthetic after being lost in combat. From his sparse quarters in an abandoned factory complex, Jorak accessed restricted military channels, piecing together information about the ongoing hunt. What he discovered sent a chill through his mostly organic spine. The Queen wasn't merely seeking a novel specimen for her collection, she was pursuing technology that could potentially shift the balance of power in Arcanus. "Fool woman," he muttered, disconnecting from the classified channel. "She doesn't understand what she's chasing." Jorak had encountered beings like Kale before, during that fateful campaign that had cost him his position and nearly his life. He remembered the blue energy, the impossible resilience, the way conventional weapons seemed to pass through them as though they occupied a slightly different phase of reality, making a decision that would likely result in his execution if discovered. Jorak activated his emergency protocol, summoning the remnants of loyalists who had followed him into disgrace. If the queen captured this being and extracted its secrets, her power would become truly absolute. That could not be allowed to happen. As Kale and Maya approached the entrance to the ancient catacombs, the forest around them underwent a subtle transformation. The temperature dropped precipitously, and mist began to coalesce among the trees, reducing visibility to mere feet. The bioluminescent flora that had illuminated their path dimmed, as though something was absorbing their light. "We're being hunted again," Maya whispered, her enhanced vision struggling to penetrate the unnatural fog. "This is Nyx's work, environmental manipulation." Kale nodded, his eyes scanning their surroundings. The blue energy beneath his skin pulsed faintly, providing minimal illumination. "The entrance is close, less than half a kilometer ahead. But this fog isn't merely for concealment, it's a medium." As if confirming his assessment, tendrils of darkness began to form within the mist, solidifying into whip-like appendages that lashed out from multiple directions simultaneously. These shadowy constructs moved with predatory intelligence, targeting vulnerable points with uncanny precision. Maya deployed her energy modulator, creating a field that disrupted some of the shadow tendrils, causing them to lose cohesion temporarily. But the effect was limited, and the darkness quickly adapted to the interference. Kale faced the assault differently. The blue energy emanating from his body intensified, creating a barrier that the shadow constructs couldn't easily penetrate. But maintaining this defense clearly taxed his already depleted resources, and the wound from Vex's attack continued to hamper his movements. "We can't fight through this," he stated grimly. "Nyx is manipulating the entire environment. We need to change our approach." Maya gestured toward a depression in the forest floor nearby. "There's an underwater passage that connects to the catacombs. The bioengineers use it to study the ancient water purification systems. If we can reach it." Their decision was made for them as a new threat materialized. Axion and his contingent of sentinels approaching from the opposite direction, creating a closing net of pursuers. The hunter's reality-warping technology was evident in the distorted space around him, where distances seemed compressed and gravity fluctuated unpredictably. With no alternative, they made a desperate dash for the underwater passage, evading shadow constructs and spatial distortions alike. Maya led the way, her knowledge of the forest proving invaluable as they navigated through the increasingly hostile environment. The passage itself was concealed beneath a seemingly solid root structure, which Maya activated with a specific sequence of pressures applied to key points. The roots parted, revealing a narrow shaft filled with crystal-clear water that glowed with faint bioluminescence. "I hope whatever you are can survive underwater," Maya said, preparing to dive. Kale's response was a tight smile. "I've survived worse." They plunged into the passage just as Nyx and Axion converged on their position. The hunter's specialized abilities creating a maelstrom of darkness and distorted space that tore through the vegetation where they had stood moments before. The underwater tunnel was a marvel of ancient bioengineering, its walls lined with living organisms that filtered and oxygenated the water while generating soft light. Maya had augmented lungs that could extract oxygen directly from water for limited periods. But she was surprised to observe that Kale showed no signs of respiratory distress whatsoever. He moved through the water with practiced ease, his wound leaving a faint trail of luminescent particles that quickly dispersed in the current. After several minutes of swimming, they emerged in a partially flooded chamber deep beneath the surface. Ancient architecture surrounded them, seamless structures that combined stone, metal, and living tissue in ways that even Arcanus's most advanced engineers couldn't replicate. Symbols covered the walls, resembling mathematical equations interwoven with organic patterns. As they pulled themselves onto a raised platform, Maya caught her breath while Kale examined their surroundings with evident familiarity. "You've been here before," she stated, observing his recognition of the space. Kale ran his fingers along one of the wall inscriptions, tracing its contours with the precision of someone who understood its meaning. These catacombs were once centers of learning and innovation. Before Arcanus, before the division between biological and technological became so pronounced. "How old are you, really?" Maya asked directly, her enhanced eyes studying his face for any reaction. Kale's expression remained carefully neutral, but something ancient and weary surfaced in his midnight blue eyes. Age becomes a relative concept after a certain point. Maya, let's just say I've watched civilizations like Arcanis rise and fall many times. Before she could press further, a new voice echoed through the chamber, gruff, authoritative, and unmistakably human despite subtle electronic undertones. The Queen's hunters will breach these catacombs within 20 minutes, announced General Jorak as he emerged from a concealed entrance, accompanied by a small group of soldiers whose augmentations were primarily military in nature. And when they do, you'll need more than ancient knowledge to survive. Kale turned to face the newcomer, his posture shifting subtly into a defensive stance. General Jorak, he acknowledged with surprising recognition. I thought you perished during the border campaign. Jorak's weathered face registered shock before quickly masking it. How do you? He stopped mid-question, his eyes narrowing as understanding dawned. You were there. One of the entities we encountered beyond the quantum rift. I observed. Kyle corrected. I did not participate in that conflict. Maya looked between them in confusion. The border campaign was 50 years ago. How could you have been there? You don't look a day over 40. A bitter laugh escaped Jorak. Appearances can be deceptive, Dr. Maya. Something our queen understood all too well when she abandoned her human form for mechanical perfection. He focused his attention back on Kale. I've spent 5 decades trying to understand what we encountered beyond the rift. Technology that seemed alive, biology that functioned like machinery, beings that existed between states of matter. And now you believe I'm connected to those entities. Kale concluded. I know you are, Jorak stated firmly. The energy signature is unmistakable. The Queen thinks she's hunting a unique specimen. But what she's really found is the advanced scout for something far beyond her comprehension. This accusation hung in the air between them, creating a moment of tense silence that Maya finally broke. Whatever he is, he's being hunted. And right now, we all share a common enemy in the Queen's forces. Jorak considered this, his military-grade ocular implant scanning Kale with visible skepticism. True enough, my objective is preventing Elysia from acquiring technology that would make her truly invincible, if that means temporarily aligning with whatever you are, so be it. With reluctant pragmatism, Jorak outlined his plan. His forces had mapped significant portions of the ancient catacombs during clandestine expeditions over the years. At the heart of the complex lay a chamber housing technology that predated Arcanis by millennia, the mechanized sanctum, rumored to contain the seeds of all biotechnological advancement in the known world. If we can reach the sanctum before the Queen's hunters, Jorak explained, we might find weapons or defenses capable of repelling them. At minimum, it provides a defensible position with multiple escape routes. Maya activated a holographic display from her equipment pack, overlaying Jorak's map data with her own research on the catacombs layout. There's a more direct route through the chrysalis corridor, she suggested, indicating a passage that Jorak's maps marked as inaccessible. Sealed by collapse during our last expedition, Jorak objected, tons of ancient debris blocking the path. Kale studied the holographic representation, then placed his hand over the collapsed section. It can be cleared, he stated with quiet certainty. When both Maya and Jorak looked at him questioningly, he added, the energy I channel can temporarily alter the physical properties of matter. With sufficient focus, I can create a passage. Jorak's expression reflected deep suspicion, but pragmatism won out. If you can deliver on that claim, it would save us valuable time. Their planning was interrupted by a distant rumble that reverberated through the catacombs structure. Nyx and Axion had begun their assault on the outer defenses. The ancient complex's automated security systems, dormant for centuries, had activated in response to the intrusion. But against the Queen's elite hunters, they would provide only temporary resistance. We move now, Jorak commanded, his soldiers forming a protective formation around their small group. The chrysalis corridor is 2 levels down. Dr. Maya, lead the way with your environmental analysis equipment. My point guards will watch for traps. As they navigated deeper into the catacombs, the architecture grew increasingly alien. Surfaces that appeared solid from one angle revealed themselves to be permeable from another, and corridors seemed to reconfigure subtly when not directly observed. The ancient builders had created spaces that defied conventional physics, incorporating principles that Arcanus' scientists were only beginning to theorize. Throughout their descent, Kale's condition continued to deteriorate. The wound from Vex's attack had spread, the decay slowly advancing despite his body's efforts to contain it. The blue energy beneath his skin fluctuated erratically, sometimes pulsing brightly, other times dimming to near invisibility. Maya noticed his struggle and fell back to walk beside him. "Your energy is destabilizing," she observed quietly, so Jorak couldn't overhear. "Is there anything in my equipment that might help?" Kale shook his head. "What I need cannot be synthesized with current technology. In the sanctum, perhaps?" They reached the collapsed chrysalis corridor, a once magnificent passage whose crystalline walls were now buried beneath massive fragments of the catacomb's ceiling. Jorak's soldiers established a perimeter while Kale approached the blockage. "This will draw attention," he warned, placing both palms against the debris. "The energy signature will be detectable to the hunter's sensors." Jorak nodded grimly. "Then we'll need to move quickly once the path is clear. My rear guard will lay countermeasures to slow pursuit." Kale closed his midnight blue eyes, concentrating deeply as the luminous energy within him gathered and flowed toward his hands. The blue glow intensified until it was painful to look at directly, enveloping the debris in a field that seemed to alter the fundamental properties of matter. Massive chunks of material began to shift, not breaking apart but passing through one another as though temporarily occupying different phases of reality. A passage formed, not by clearing the debris, but by creating a state where solid matter could be traversed as though it were no more substantial than mist. "Move through now," Kale instructed, his voice strained with effort. "The effect is temporary. I can only maintain it for approximately 90 seconds. Jorak's soldiers went first, followed by Maya with her equipment. Jorak himself hesitated, watching Kale with a mixture of awe and deep suspicion. "After you, General," Kale said, the blue energy fluctuating as his reserves diminished. "And leave you behind to seal us in? I think not." Jorak gestured with his military prosthetic. "We go together." With no time to argue, they entered the phase-shifted passage simultaneously, moving through solid matter that offered resistance like thick liquid rather than impenetrable stone. Behind them, the passage began to re-solidify, matter returning to its normal state as Kale's influence waned. They emerged on the other side just as the phase shift collapsed, the passage once again becoming solid debris. Kale staggered, nearly falling as the tremendous energy expenditure took its toll. The wound from Vex now extended across his chest, the decay spreading visibly through tissue that struggled to regenerate. Maya rushed to support him, her scanning equipment automatically assessing his condition. "Your cellular integrity is failing," she reported with professional calm that belied her concern. "The energy patterns are becoming increasingly erratic." Jorak observed this exchange with calculating eyes before turning to his point guards. "Distance to the sanctum?" 300 meters, sir," one soldier reported, consulting a mapping device. "But we're detecting unusual energy fluctuations ahead." As if in confirmation of this warning, the walls of the corridor began to pulse with soft light, ancient systems awakening in response to their presence. Symbols similar to those they had seen earlier appeared, flowing across surfaces like liquid mathematics. "The complex is scanning us," Maya realized, watching as the pattern seemed to focus particularly on Kale. "It's recognizing something." Kale straightened despite his weakened state, his midnight blue eyes tracking the moving symbols with evident comprehension. "Not recognition," he corrected quietly. "Authentication." Before anyone could question this statement, the corridor ahead transformed. What had appeared to be a solid wall reconfigured into an elaborate doorway that opened onto a vast, domed chamber. The mechanized sanctum lay before them, its interior illuminated by the same soft blue light that emanated from beneath Kale's skin. The sanctum defied easy description, part laboratory, part temple, part living organism. At its center stood a column of pure energy, contained within a crystalline structure that pulsed with rhythms suggesting consciousness rather than mere mechanical function. Surrounding this central column were workstations that combined biological components with mechanical interfaces, all designed to interact with the energy at the heart of the chamber. Impossible, Jorak breathed, his military discipline momentarily forgotten in the face of such ancient wonder. This technology, it can't be. It is, Kale confirmed, moving toward the central column with newfound purpose despite his deteriorating condition. The original template for what would eventually become Arcanus's biotechnology, the seed from which your civilization grew. As Kale approached the energy column, the symbols throughout the chamber began to react, flowing toward him and orbiting his form like electrons around a nucleus. The blue energy beneath his skin responded in kind, pulsing in perfect synchronization with the column. Maya watched in fascination, her enhanced vision capturing details invisible to others. The patterns match, she observed. Your internal energy and whatever powers this chamber, they're identical. Jorak's suspicion returned full force. What are you? He demanded, his prosthetic arm reconfiguring into a weapon. What connection do you have to this place? Before Kale could respond, alarms echoed through the catacombs, proximity warnings from Jorak's rear guard. The Queen's hunters had broken through faster than anticipated and were converging on the sanctum. We're out of time for explanations, Kale stated, placing his palm against the crystalline structure surrounding the energy column. I need to connect with the system. It may be the only way to stop the hunters and heal this wound. Jorak hesitated, clearly torn between his mistrust of Kale and his fear of the Queen acquiring whatever power the sanctum contained. Finally, he nodded curtly. Do what you must. My soldiers will hold the entrance as long as possible. As Jorak's forces took defensive positions, Maya approached Kale at the central column. What can I do to help? Monitor the integration, he instructed, the blue energy now flowing visibly between his body and the column. If the patterns destabilize, use your modulator to attempt harmonization. With that, Kale pressed his palm more firmly against the crystal, and the boundary between his body and the energy column seemed to blur. The blue luminescence intensified dramatically, and for a brief moment, Maya could see something remarkable. Kale's true form partially manifesting as the human facade temporarily thinned. What she glimpsed was neither fully biological nor mechanical, but a perfect synthesis of both, a being composed of energy patterns so complex they formed physical structures, a consciousness that existed simultaneously as matter and information. The moment passed quickly as Kale reasserted control, but the connection with the sanctum's energy had been established. Information flowed between them in patterns too complex for even Maya's enhanced perception to interpret. At the entrance to the sanctum, the first skirmish began. Nyx's shadow constructs poured through openings in the catacomb's structure, while Axion's spatial distortions made the defensive positions increasingly untenable. Jorak's soldiers fought with the desperation of those who knew retreat was impossible, deploying countermeasures that temporarily disrupted the hunters' specialized abilities. But it was a losing battle. One by one, Jorak's soldiers fell, some to Nyx's shadows that accelerated entropy within living tissue, others to Axion's gravity wells that crushed enhanced limbs and ruptured vital systems. Jorak himself fought with the skill of a veteran commander, his prosthetic arm cycling through weapons and countermeasures with practiced efficiency. Yet even his considerable military experience couldn't withstand the coordinated assault of the Queen's elite hunters. A spatial distortion from Axion caught him mid-movement, compressing the space around his organic arm and severing it cleanly. Jorak collapsed, systems failing as his augmentations struggled to compensate for the massive trauma. With the defenders neutralized, Nyx and Axion entered the sanctum, only to halt at the sight that greeted them. Kyle stood at the chamber's center, his form now engulfed in blue energy that formed intricate patterns throughout the vast space. The wound from Vex's attack was healing visibly, decay reversing as the connection with the Sanctum's power restored his depleted resources. Target acquired, Axion stated, his voice devoid of emotion as he prepared a spatial compression field designed to immobilize rather than destroy. But before either hunter could attack, a new presence materialized in the sanctum, Queen Elysia herself, having tracked her hunter's progress and determined that this discovery warranted her personal attention. Unlike her usual appearances where she projected overwhelming authority, Elysia entered the sanctum with uncharacteristic caution. Her silver eyes rotated rapidly, processing the ancient technology with evident recognition that bordered on reverence. "Hold your attack," she commanded her hunters, approaching the central column where Kale stood connected to the energy matrix. This is beyond what I anticipated." Kale regarded her calmly, the blue energy surrounding him stabilizing into a controlled aura. "Hello, Elysia," he said, his voice carrying unusual resonance in the chamber. "It's been a long time." The Queen's perfect metallic features registered genuine shock, an emotion her cybernetic systems rarely displayed. "That voice," she whispered, her silver eyes fixed on Kale's midnight blue ones. "It's not possible. Many things once thought impossible become merely improbable with sufficient time." Kale replied, "You of all people should understand that concept." Maya, who had been monitoring the energy patterns during this exchange, looked between them in confusion. "You know each other." "We did," Elysia acknowledged, her voice stripped of its usual artificial modulation, revealing something almost human beneath. "Before my transformation, before I chose this path." With deliberate movements, Kale separated himself from the energy column, though the connection remained evident in the blue luminescence that continued to flow between them. 2 centuries ago, Elysia and I were colleagues, researchers studying the ancient ruins that would eventually be incorporated into Arcanus's foundation. "We discovered this place together," Elysia continued, her silver eyes never leaving Kale's face. "But we disagreed fundamentally on how its power should be utilized." Elysia believed technology should dominate biology, that organic life was inherently flawed and needed to be controlled, enhanced, eventually replaced. Kale's voice carried no judgment, merely stating historical fact. "I advocated for balance and integration, a philosophical difference that led to a more physical confrontation," the Queen concluded, her gaze shifting to the energy column. "You disappeared afterward. I assumed you had perished in the collapse that sealed the deeper sections of the catacombs." Kale smiled faintly. "I needed time to recover, time to observe what direction Arcanus would take under your guidance." This revelation created a moment of stunned silence, broken eventually by Maya. "But if you knew each other 200 years ago, and you're still alive without the extensive augmentations the Queen has undergone, then he is something else entirely." Elysia finished for her, silver eyes rotating thoughtfully. "Something I failed to recognize until now, despite all my enhancements." From his position near the entrance, Jorak managed to lift himself partially upright, his remaining system stabilizing enough to maintain consciousness. "He's connected to the entities from beyond the quantum rift," he stated, his voice strained but determined. "The same technology, the same energy signatures." Kale regarded the fallen general with something approaching compassion. "Not connected to them, General. One of them. Or rather, they are an offshoot of what I represent. A civilization that learned to truly integrate biological and technological evolution, rather than forcing one to dominate the other." Elysia's perfect features reconfigured to display intense interest. "You're saying you're not human, that you never were." "I was human once," Kale corrected, the blue energy pulsing gently beneath his skin. "Many millennia ago, by your reckoning of time. What I am now is the result of natural evolution guided by conscious choice, each cell in my body simultaneously biological and technological, each thought both organic impulse and computational process." With a gesture, He caused the energy patterns within the sanctum to form a three-dimensional representation, a historical record showing civilizations rising and falling. Technological revolutions followed by biological adaptations. The long, intricate dance of evolution playing out across thousands of years. Arcanus stands at a crossroads. Kale continued, the representation focusing on their current moment in history. Your path of cybernetic dominance leads to a dead end, Elysia. Not in your lifetime. Perhaps. But eventually? True advancement comes from harmony, not subjugation. The Queen studied the historical projection, her analytical systems processing implications that her human intuition had once been able to grasp naturally. You returned to demonstrate this, she concluded, to... What? Save us from ourselves. I returned to observe, Kale corrected. Intervention was never my intention, but your hunt forced my hand. A tense silence fell over the sanctum as Elysia processed this information. Her hunters remained poised for attack, awaiting commands that didn't come. Instead, the Queen approached the central energy column, examining it with the expert eye of someone who understood its fundamental principles, if not its full potential. If what you show is accurate, she finally said, then my vision for Arcanus is fundamentally flawed. 2 centuries of advancement built on an unsustainable foundation. Not flawed, Kale replied, his tone softening. Incomplete. There is still time to adjust course, to find balance between your technological achievements and biological potential. From her position beside the monitoring equipment, Maya spoke up. The energy patterns throughout the catacombs are changing, she reported. They're responding to your interaction, both of you. It's as though the system is reconfiguring itself. Indeed, the sanctum was undergoing a transformation, the blue energy expanding to fill the entire chamber, symbols flowing more rapidly across surfaces, workstations activating after millennia of dormancy. The ancient complex was awakening fully, responding to the presence of both Kale's integrated nature and Elysia's advanced cybernetics. It's creating a synthesis, Kale explained, watching the process with evident satisfaction. A template for true integration based on both our forms. For the first time since her complete cybernetic transformation, uncertainty showed in Elysia's silver eyes. What would this mean for Arcanus, for my rule? Evolution. Kale answered simply. Not replacement, but growth. Your cybernetic technologies complemented by biological adaptability. Not dominance of one approach, but harmonious integration of both. As they discussed these profound implications, Jorak managed to drag himself closer to the central column, his military training allowing him to move despite grievous injuries. You speak of harmony, he addressed Kale. But your kind attacked our borders 50 years ago. How do you explain that aggression? Kale turned his attention to the general, expression somber. Those you encountered were not representative of our whole, like any advanced civilization. We have factions with different philosophies. Some believe intervention is necessary when younger civilizations begin developing technologies they may not fully understand. And you? Jorak pressed, his remaining organic eye narrowing in suspicion. I believe in observation and offering knowledge when sought, not forcing it when unwelcome. Kale replied, which is why I oppose that incursion and why I've spent decades monitoring Arcanus's development from within. This exchange was interrupted by Maya, who had continued analyzing the sanctum's changing energy patterns. Something's happening, she announced, her enhanced eyes widening as she interpreted the data. The system is stabilizing into a new configuration, one that could theoretically be implemented throughout Arcanus's infrastructure. Elysia moved to examine Maya's findings, her analytical systems rapidly processing the implications. A complete restructuring of our biotechnological foundation, she murmured, silver eyes rotating in rapid calculation. Requiring significant adjustments to existing systems, but ultimately creating a more sustainable, adaptable framework. She turned to Kale, her perfect metallic features unable to fully convey the complexity of her reaction. You offer Arcanus an alternative path, but accepting it would mean acknowledging the limitations of my vision. The flaws in the system I've spent 2 centuries perfecting. All perfection is temporary. Kale replied gently. All systems eventually evolve or collapse. The truly remarkable achievement is recognizing when adaptation is necessary and having the courage to implement it. In this moment of decision, the sanctum seemed to hold its breath, ancient energies pulsing in anticipation of a choice that would determine Arcanus's future. Nyx and Axion remained at attention, awaiting orders from their queen. Jorak watched with the wary assessment of a veteran who had seen too many false promises of peace. And Maya observed it all with the keen interest of a scientist witnessing history in the making. Finally, Elysia spoke, her voice carrying the weight of 2 centuries of leadership. I built Arcanus on the principle that advancement requires difficult choices. That sentimentality must sometimes be sacrificed for progress. Her silver eyes fixed on Kale. If I accept this new direction, it would be for the same reason, because analysis indicates it offers superior long-term outcomes. Kale inclined his head in acknowledgement. The motivation matters less than the result, in this case. Then we have an accord, Elysia declared, turning to her hunters. Stand down, our quarry is now our consultant. Nyx and Axion complied immediately, though their postures suggested continued readiness should circumstances change. With the immediate threat neutralized, attention turned to the wounded, Jorak in particular, whose systems were rapidly failing due to the trauma inflicted during the battle. Maya approached the general, her scanning equipment assessing his condition. His organic components are severely compromised, she reported, and his augmentations are entering shutdown sequence to preserve core functions. Kale moved to Jorak's side, the blue energy still emanating from his form. With your permission, he addressed the general. I can stabilize your condition using principles from the sanctum. It won't be a full restoration, but it should prevent immediate system failure. Jorak regarded him with suspicion that warred with pragmatism. Do what you must, he finally conceded. But know that my cooperation now doesn't imply trust. Noted, Kale replied with a faint smile, placing his palm against Jorak's chest. The blue energy flowed between them, not invading the general's systems, but rather creating a supportive field that allowed his organic and mechanical components to synchronize more effectively. The most critical damage began to stabilize, bleeding stopped, and failing systems returned to minimal functionality. As Kale worked, Elysia addressed her hunters. Return to the Citadel. Inform the Royal Engineers to prepare for my arrival with new development protocols. Her silver eyes shifted to the wounded general. And arrange medical transport for General Jorak and his surviving soldiers. Their service today will be recognized appropriately. This order, essentially a reinstatement of Jorak's position after 5 decades of exile, caused visible surprise among all present. The Queen's reputation for holding grudges was well established. That she would so readily reverse such a long-standing judgment indicated how profoundly the day's revelations had affected her calculations. As the hunters departed to execute these commands, Elysia turned her attention back to the sanctum's central systems. The integration process will require time, she observed, studying the complex energy patterns. Years, perhaps decades, to fully implement throughout Arcanus. Evolution is rarely instantaneous. Kale agreed, completing his stabilization of Jorak's condition. But the foundation established here will guide that process naturally, if allowed to develop without excessive interference. Maya, who had been examining the historical records displayed in the energy matrix, looked up with sudden realization. These records show previous attempts at integration, some successful, others catastrophically failed. What makes you believe Arcanus will achieve the former rather than the latter? Kale's midnight blue eyes met hers with ancient wisdom tempered by cautious optimism. Because unlike those previous attempts, Arcanus has something invaluable, a leader capable of adapting her vision when presented with compelling evidence. He glanced meaningfully at Elysia. Stubbornness in the face of new data is not a trait the Queen suffers from. Whatever her other qualities might be, This subtle compliment earned a metallic smile from Elysia. Flattery. Kale? After all these centuries? Observation, he corrected. Your pursuit of me demonstrated tremendous adaptability. Each hunter employed different strategies based on new information. You consistently prioritized acquisition of knowledge over elimination of perceived threats. These are traits that favor successful integration. With Jorak stabilized and arrangements made for proper medical attention, the immediate crisis had passed. The sanctum continued its reconfiguration, ancient systems harmonizing with the new templates created by Kale and Elysia's interaction. What happens now? Maya asked, looking between the ancient being and the cybernetic queen. To Arcanus? To you? Elysia answered first, her voice carrying the certainty of a ruler who had made a strategic decision. Arcanus enters a new phase of development. The division between technological and biological citizens will be gradually reduced as integration protocols are implemented. My hunters will become ambassadors of this new approach rather than enforcers of the old paradigm. She turned to Kale, silver eyes displaying genuine curiosity. As for you, will you remain to witness this transformation? Or does your path lead elsewhere now that your identity has been revealed? Kale's expression suggested he was considering options that spanned far beyond their immediate circumstances. I'll remain long enough to ensure the transition begins properly, he decided. There are aspects of integration that will benefit from direct guidance rather than interpretation of historical records. His gaze shifted to the wounded Jorak, who watched their exchange with the wariness of a military commander assessing potential threats. And there are matters beyond Arcanus that require attention. The faction of my kind that General Jorak encountered 50 years ago has likely not abandoned their interventionist philosophies. They may return when they detect the changes beginning here. A problem for another day. Elysia stated pragmatically. Our immediate priority is stabilizing these new protocols and beginning implementation in the Citadel's core systems. As they prepared to leave the sanctum, Maya approached Kale with one final question, one that had been forming since she first witnessed his true nature. The blue energy, she said, gesturing to the luminescence still visible beneath his skin. What is it, fundamentally? Kale considered her question with the careful deliberation of someone translating between incompatible languages. The simplest explanation? It's consciousness made manifest, thought patterns with enough coherence and energy to influence physical reality, the ultimate integration of mind and matter. Achievable by humans, she pressed, her enhanced eyes studying the energy patterns with scientific curiosity. Eventually, he replied with a smile that hinted at possibilities beyond her current understanding. Given sufficient time and the right guidance, as they emerged from the catacombs into the verdant zone, the three suns of Arcanus were setting, casting long shadows across the landscape where technological and biological domains met. The kingdom stood on the threshold of transformation, not an overnight revolution, but the beginning of an evolutionary process that would ultimately redefine its very nature. Kale paused at the boundary between worlds, his midnight blue eyes reflecting the fading light. For centuries, he had wandered between civilizations, observing their struggles to balance advancement with sustainability, power with wisdom, in Arcanus, with its cybernetic queen and ancient catacombs. He had found something rare, a technological society capable of recognizing its limitations and adapting its course. Whether this adaptation would lead to true harmony or merely a more sophisticated form of imbalance remained to be seen. But for the first time in many centuries, Kale felt something approaching hope for this corner of the universe. And for now, that was enough to justify remaining, to guide, to observe, and perhaps to learn something new himself in the process. The Queen, walking beside him with the mechanical precision that had become her hallmark, seemed to sense his thoughts. You doubt our ability to implement true integration, she observed, her silver eyes rotating thoughtfully. I doubt all absolute certainties, Kale replied, watching as the last light faded from Arcanus's complex horizon. But I've witnessed enough to know that doubt itself can be a catalyst for remarkable transformation. As darkness fell, The blue energy beneath his skin provided gentle illumination, a living reminder that the boundaries between technology and biology, between consciousness and matter, were perhaps more permeable than anyone in Arcanus had dared to imagine. A new hunt had begun, not for dominance or capture, but for balance and integration. And this hunt would last not days or weeks, but generations. In the gathering shadows, Maya activated her bioluminescent augmentations, creating a soft green glow that complemented Kale's blue radiance. Every significant advance begins with a single step, she offered, her scientific pragmatism tempered by newfound optimism. Kale nodded, his ancient eyes focused on the distant lights of Meridian, where Arcanus's technological heart pulsed with possibilities yet unrealized. And every journey reveals its true destination only to those who remain open to unexpected paths. Together, this unlikely trinity, ancient integrated being, cybernetic queen, and visionary bioengineer, moved toward the capital, carrying with them the seeds of transformation that would ultimately determine whether Arcane would thrive or falter in the face of evolution's most fundamental challenge, the courage to change.